Welcome to a community built of tomorrow's business leaders. Hey guys, I'm William Freitas, and this is the Socius Podcast. Socius, welcome back to another episode. Today we've got Jose Ramirez from HOPR. Jose, hello. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
And for the first time ever, we've got some product placement. As you can see, HOPR, thank you for bringing the drinks on the show. So it's pretty evident as to what it is that you do. You're a drinks manufacturer, I guess.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the journey. I'm going to be sipping this throughout the episode. Tell us a little bit about how HOPR began and what your story is.
Yeah, cool. So thanks again for having me. It's my first podcast, as I mentioned earlier. So I'm born and raised in New York, and I've been here for about 9 years. This is my 9th year. And yeah, growing up, I was an athlete and whatnot and played at high level soccer. I think you have a soccer background as well. And I wasn't a big drinker, to be honest with you, but it wasn't until in my early 20s when I started drinking a bit, and it took me down a path that wasn't the best, right? I think it limited my potential and what I could have become. Plus, obviously, there's those injuries and whatnot. But when you fast forward to, me moving here, COVID kind of led me down a black hole when it came to drinking. And I think many of us were drinking a bit too much, right? I mean, what else was there to do back then? And it was one night in September where I hadn't been drinking at all during the day or at night, but it was around midnight, and I was watching, I think, a football match, and I was like, oh, I want to drink. So I went to the fridge and I went for an alcoholic beverage. I grabbed it and I was like, why do I need to drink now? It's like midnight and I should just go to sleep or just watch the game without drinking it, right? There's no point. And the reason why I thought about that was because I've had family and friends pass away from alcohol-related issues. So it's like, I didn't want to go down that route. And I put it back. The next day, I went for a walk, and I was just like, do I have a problem? I was with my missus. I was like, do I have a problem? She's like, no, you don't have a problem. I know people that have problems. And I was like, yeah, but I feel like I've been drinking too much, and it's just unlike me. So she's like, well, then fix it, right? So I was like, well, maybe there's a drink that you can drink that isn't alcoholic and it still gets you drunk maybe, or maybe it is alcohol and it gets you drunk, but you don't get the consequences. And yeah, back then there was a rise of non-alcoholic beverages. So non-alcoholic beer, and cocktails and wine. So I thought that's cool.
How long ago?
This is back in 2020. But the one thing that these beverages were missing was the feeling, right, that you get from drinking. So that relaxation feeling. And so I said, is this possible to have a drink that actually makes you feel relaxed and whatnot? So I literally Googled, how do you feel the buzz without the booze? And saw that in the US, there were beverage companies that were just starting out that were leveraging plant-based ingredients called adaptogens and nootropics that can elicit this relaxation effect. And I was like, that's brilliant. So I don't have a background in brewing. I spent 10 years in tech. And so I said, this is a problem though. And in the tech world, it's about solving problems, right? So I was like, how do I take that approach into this beverage? Because I have a problem and I'm sure others have a problem as well. So I literally walked into the Merrickville brewery place and I bought equipment and started just trying it at home. Lots of trial and error and blowing up the kitchen a bit. And just seeing, how the taste was like first, right, from hops. Because I started seeing that hop water. Again, hops are what goes into beer to give beer its bitterness and aroma. So that gives flavor, right? And if you put it in water, you can get different types of flavor. And that was grown in the US. And I was like, whoa, that's pretty brilliant. So if you combine both, you can get a healthy beverage because it's 0 calories, 0 sugar, 0 carbs, vegan, gluten-free. So I was like, it's a pretty healthy drink. And if you can also add a relaxation effect, you're onto something, right?
Yeah. So take us a little bit more into the hop, right? For those people who don't know what hops are, It's a natural ingredient. Talk to us more about that.
So hops are basically like a little bud, and it's in the cannabis family, and it can be found across the world. We use hops from the US, from New Zealand, from Australia. And the one that you're holding is actually called the Citra hops one. So I believe those come from Washington State, just like the mango one uses Citra. And so depending on how much hop drops you put into the beverage, the water, the temperature, you can elicit different flavor profiles, and that's what craft breweries do a lot, and that's why you have many different IPAs, pale ales, and different combinations will produce different results.
I can definitely taste the elderflower. In this one, for sure. No, this is great. And so then talk to us about the, I guess, inclusion of the nootropics component. Like, and take us to how it is that you sourced these ingredients initially. You had a tech background, no background in brewing or anything FMCG related. Is that right?
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
So how did you go about this? Was this purely just Googling, or take us to day one?
Yeah, basically, so my partner is in the hospitality industry. So when I came with this idea, she was like, "Oh, you should speak to this company here because they work with beverage companies." I was like, "Okay." So I didn't want to like say much, right? It was just like, "Hey, I have this idea. I want to create a beverage with plant-based ingredients," and they're like, "Oh, that's getting kind of popular." So yeah, reach out to this group, and they'll help you out maybe. So it really was just like getting in, using my little network to find flavor houses for one. So these are companies that basically create different flavor profiles for you. And they can also make drinks for you. They make like flavored sparkling water, like seltzers, alcoholic seltzers, and things like that. So yeah, it was a lot of Googling as well.
Okay, and so then take us through the journey. Like, at what part after blowing up the kitchen a number of times did you decide, this is something that I'm going to run with?
So I grew up, if we go back, right, like I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. And so when I was like 5, 6 years old, I was selling, I don't know if you remember like these keychains they were called lanyard. And it's basically, you can create like different like designs, I think they were called. And I would just sell them, right? And for me, it was fun. It was cool. And I also used to sell, funny enough, like DVDs and CDs. I didn't grow up with much money, right? So for me, it was just like, how do I make $1, right? Yeah. But my dad, was an entrepreneur as well. Like he had a side gig. He's more a side gig than an entrepreneur. But for me, I always wanted to do my own thing. The problem was that I had over $100,000 in student loan debt. So for me, I had to work.
Back in the US?
Yep.
Okay.
And I was brought over here too, right? Because I had to still pay for them. Cool. So I couldn't do anything until I really paid those off. So I wasn't into COVID when I was able to pay them off. So COVID was a blessing and also like not so good. But yeah, for me, it was just like, after trying it, after getting feedback from like friends that were here, I was like, what do you guys think? Would you drink this? And they're like, yeah, I drink this. I was like, okay. But yeah, man, I was working full time and I was still like a side gig, but I wasn't sleeping, right? Like I was like, if I'm going to make this work, I have to go all in, right? And that was the main factor that I always had, is like, if I wasn't working on my regular job, I was just up until like 3 a.m., 4 a.m. working on this. Yeah, so it was just like, I know I can make this work, and I know the world needs this, especially here in Australia. And if we're going to be the first to do this, then let's do it, right?
And so how long did you side gig this for? How long were you juggling a full-time job and working till 3 a.m. on HOPR?
Yeah, so let's say September 2020, and then I quit my full-time job February 2022, I think it was. Okay. But then my message was like, what are you going to do for money? This isn't making you money. Because we actually launched in December of 2021, right? So they're like, good question. What do I do? So she's like, well, if you want, you can be a night guard at our hotel. I was like, what's that? They're like, well, you have to be there from 12:30 a.m. to 6:30 a.m. And you have to do a few like tasks that we have for you. But at the same time, you can work on your business if you want. I was like, yeah, okay, cool. So I did that 3 days a week from February 2022 until about October 2023. So sleeping, getting home at 7 a.m., waking up at 11 a.m., working on HOPR, right? Fulfilling orders, just on the business. So yeah, I wasn't staying up until 4 a.m. Well, technically I was staying up until 6 a.m. or 7 a.m., but differently, right?
And so, I mean, not to jump around too much, but you briefly mentioned you started in September 2020, and you only really launched in December 21.
Yeah.
So that's what, like a year and 2 months, effectively, a couple months. So just over a year of formulation. Yeah. What's that process like? Because the people that are listening, often there are either business owners or people who are looking to start businesses, and very intrigued on your background and your history about how it is that you created that. And for something that's take more than a year, a lot of people can most certainly lose faith that this is going to work, right? How many times did you question whether this was going to work?
Back then, I was always, this is going to work. Yeah, it wasn't until afterwards I was like, oh. But no, like I think I just had a passion for it, right? I was just like, I'm finally getting the opportunity to build something of my own, and I've always wanted to do it. And I remember when I said long ago, I was like, once I pay off my student loans, I'm gonna make it work, no matter what, do whatever it takes. And so, again, not knowing what I was doing, I learned all myself, like through YouTube, funny enough, from design. So I designed the can myself, right? Like the copy, everything I did myself, because I actually didn't have the luxury to outsource it, right? I didn't have the money to do that. So I had to learn. And I grew inspiration from others as well, right? Because you always learn best from others, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, that was the, for those year and change, it was really me. That's why it took maybe too long, because I was just doing it all myself and on the side.
I mean, there are plenty of businesses that take longer than 12 months. Some businesses take over 2 years to get off the ground. So it's about the perseverance to be clear on what the end goal looks like. And as you said, being passionate and driven towards getting there.
For sure.
It was never really an option for it not to work.
Yeah, I think in many cases, many entrepreneurs will have the first business that doesn't do well, maybe the second business doesn't do well, but then eventually they get one, right? I feel like I didn't, and I still don't have that luxury, I think, So for me, it's like, I'm going to make this work. I have to, right? And look, it may not pan out to be anything. So far, we're doing all right. But it's still like anything can happen, and we just got to be prepared.
Fast forward to where you are now, then I guess in that sense, tell us a little bit about where you're at.
So you mentioned earlier, like how many times did you want to quit or something? Like, I think it was in May of 2023 where I had like a breakdown, and I had $10 and like 34 cents in my bank account. I was like, whoa, we're growing a little bit, but it's just like, it's too much. Like I was just burnt out. Right, I wasn't sleeping much. Like it was just not working out for me mentally, and I honestly got really, really drunk, and I took it out on my friends, and I lost friendships because of it, because I was just so burnt out, and I was just like, it's working, but it's not working, and how come you guys aren't helping me? Like, I just couldn't take it anymore.
Yeah.
But that was kind of like, that kind of flipped the switch for me. I was just like, that's not me. Right? It's kind of like when I went back to 2020, where I had that moment. I was like, that's not me, man. That's not who I am. I'm better than this. And so that was kind of like, I'm going to figure this out a different way, right? Like, yes, there's going to be challenges along the way, and there always will be. There's challenges right now. But that was the trigger moment that was kind of like, I don't know, made me think differently about this whole experience and this whole journey. And from then, we just started going nonstop.
What is it that you think you did differently post that event?
I think I just needed to let something out, right? That was something that I was holding to me, because I was talking to the wall a lot, right? And the wall wasn't talking back to me, and no one was kind of listening. And I just needed to get out all my feelings and whatnot. And once I did that, and I actually spoke to like a psychologist as well, and that helped so much. So I think that was like the moment that I just needed to get it all out and start again, right? Start from not zero, but essentially zero.
That's just such a raw explanation of what it's like to be an entrepreneur or any business owner, really. you are talking to the wall a lot in the first couple of years until you have a team around you, and the people who you surround yourself with matters a lot.
Yep.
Have you had a chance to mend some of those friendships in the past?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's definitely not the same, but at the same time, I feel like it's okay because, again, different journeys. Yeah. And like I said, I need to make this work, right? And there's sacrifices you have to make. And I was watching a documentary on Carlos Alcaraz, and the sacrifices he has had to make, right, to be number one. And it's true for athletes, right? And having that athletic mindset, yeah, like you're committing let's say 20 years, right, nonstop playing a sport, dedicating your life to it. And I feel like business is the same. And I mean, for us, it's always been kind of like the build to sell mentality, right? But it's not guaranteed either, right? But I feel like if you can give it your all, it's like you leave it all on the field, right? There's no regrets.
Yeah, it's the Carlos Alcaraz idea of, obviously, a fantastic tennis player. I think you can liken being in a business journey to an athlete, most certainly. I mean, I quite like tennis as an example because no one really appreciates the traveling that they do, the touring that they do. They don't really have a home.
Correct.
They don't really have a set bunch of friends that they hang out with on the weekend because they can't.
Correct.
Relationships suffer.
Yep.
But no one really sees that, right? They see them stepping up onto Wimbledon and winning.
Correct.
And that being the glorified message. And most certainly, I think entrepreneurship is very much that too. Flexibility on work hours and so on. But then there's also the downside, right, where you're working as a security guard for almost, what is that, a year and a half?
Yeah.
And juggling 2 jobs to fund the new venture. Working additional hours to service customer inquiries.
Correct.
All the difficulties and sacrifices, kudos to you for getting to where you are today. I think that's a great account of what entrepreneurship is. Is this what you expected entrepreneurship to be?
No, I don't think so. And I think I think going back, one of the things that we've been doing since day one is documenting the journey, right? Because I was like, man, that's not what it's really like. This is what it's like, right? It's the late nights, the crying, the fighting, it's all of that. And through our social media, we've been doing a lot of that because it's important for people to see that. And one thing that I think I may have mentioned to you over a couple of months ago was that what bothers me is like the people that show only the good things. And it's like, it's not really like that. But hopefully there's others like myself, like yourself, that show what it's really like. And because, it's reality.
And so take me through the journey. What was your relationship with alcohol like, and what is it now? Like, naturally, you're building a non-alcoholic brand, not non-alcoholic business. Does that mean you stopped drinking alcohol?
I think, no, it has, like, I still drink, but differently. And I think it's more about mindful drinking now, right? And instead of, let's say, getting wasted every weekend or whatever it is, it's more like, how do you enjoy, let's say, a nice glass of wine, for example, right? And maybe it's 1 or 2 glasses, but it's when you get to the other point, right, then that's where it's kind of like, wait, think about it again. Do you want to go back to those days, right? Especially now that working 7 days a week, right, you can't afford to be hungover and whatnot. So I always keep that in mind because I do work 7 days a week, right? It may not be full 14, 16-hour days, but you still have to be on 7 days a week.
Yeah. And I'm not even going to bring age into the equation. And everyone says that a hangover is harder to recover from when you're older. But most certainly I get it. Like, being switched on is super important.
Yep.
And, even me, myself personally, I'm in an industry where alcohol is very much almost like a requisite for when you're entertaining clients. It's part of the job.
Right.
And I think there are many people out there who would be in the same category and struggle to say, I I think still to this day, they would struggle to say, oh, look, I'm not drinking, or I'd prefer not to drink. Despite all the statistics that you see, I think I was speaking to someone the other day, back in 2023, sub 25-year-olds, there was only like 17% were non-drinkers. Now it's like 70% of sub 25-year-olds are non-drinkers. That's wild. That's like an incredibly fast rate where people are not drinking alcohol. And I only sort of raise that because it doesn't necessarily mean people need to stop drinking alcohol if they go to non-alcoholic alternatives, but it's just mindful drinking, like you said, right?
Yeah, for sure. And we're not against alcohol, right? There's always a time and a place for people to have it, which is fine. But it's like, do you really need that third, fourth, or fifth one, right? Yeah. You can pace yourself. You can have a couple of hours or other beverages as well. And I think that's the important thing.
And so give us a little bit more of a snapshot. Naturally, people can go onto your socials and see a little bit about you, but give us a snapshot as to where you are now, what the team looks like, how many of these are you selling, what's your favorite? Tell us more.
Sure. So I brought on my first 2 employees in September, October 2023. And since then, so now we're about 11 total, with the bulk of them being in like the warehouse, packing orders and whatnot. There's about 7 there. And yeah, it's been great. We're close to 70 retail outlets across the country, composed of like grocery stores, bottle shops, a couple of restaurants. But like 95% of the business is online. And the reason why is because back in the day, like sales is difficult, right? And if you're not giving free cases to stores to be on the shelf, then it's hard to get in, especially because you're competing against big companies, right? That their costs are very little. So that was one of the things that I struggled with, where it's like, well, I can't compete with the big guys, so I can't give it to you cheaper than them, unfortunately, because I don't have the scale. So while everyone was fighting for the shelf space, I was like, no one's looking at online, so I'm going to try this out. And that's what changed the game for HOPR. And it was just, again, thinking differently, right? Because if you look at the back then, 2020, non-alcoholic space, everyone was just trying to replicate the taste, right? But no one was looking at the feeling as well. And that's when I was like, I'm going to do that. And then everyone was going for the shelves in the stores. And I was like, I'm going to do something different, right? So for me, it's always like, how do I continue being different from the rest so we can always stay ahead? And that's what has helped us from essentially, not day one, but, for the past couple of years.
And so give me a snapshot, because you said you brought on your first 2 employees in October 23.
Yep.
That was, from what you mentioned, it's like around about when you stopped working as a guard.
Yep.
A lot of the people listening, a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners really struggle with that first hire. It's a huge move to go taking on that responsibility to hire 1 person, let alone 2, is a monumental step. Firstly, what was that like? Why 2? And what was that feeling like, particularly after you're working two jobs? Yeah,
well, I think I just had a lot of orders to fulfill, and I couldn't do it by myself. So it's like, what do I need immediately help on? And that was fulfilling the orders, right? So that's where both people came into place. But it was also so one hire was like warehouse, the other one was warehouse, but also social media, because it was all about social media, right? But I also couldn't film myself doing all these other things, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So those were the first 2, and I knew they were important because even back then, even prior to that, I was like, content is where it's at. We're going to be a content house, and we're just going to be filming more than we're doing right now, right? Yeah. And not many people were thinking like that back then, right? Especially none of my competitors, but it's helped us so much. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, look, we're in an archaic industry. We're in insurance. And I have this conversation with Nikki all the time. We need to be focused on content all the time. Our industry is not. But what I'm highlighting is a lot of businesses, when they first start, when they hire their first employee, they don't think about marketing. They turn that tap off. They go straight to fulfillment and just focusing on fulfillment. And then fulfillment dries out. I love that you focused on, how do we focus on building more content? Let's bring someone on that's 50% social media and fulfillment at the same time.
Yeah.
So we can keep it going.
Correct. Yeah, because, if you're not recording every day, you're not marketing, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, throughout that process, what would you say was, I guess, your number one factor that led you to success?
I was gonna say not sleeping. No, I think like again, it's that mindset, right? That this is your one shot, right? To really go again all in, and there's no second. You can't be second, right? You have to be first, and that was really it. So like anyone that joins the company, in a way, I treat it like a sports team, and I'm like the manager, right? And it's about that talk you have with everyone on a daily basis to keep them motivated and saying, you got one shot and you have to make it work, right? So it's like now or never type of thing. And I think if you continue with that mindset, then you're unstoppable.
Talk to me about the mindset of it, like, because I heard a little bit of the, like, you kind of laughed about it, the non-sleeping, right? And we kind of mentioned this a little bit earlier in the podcast. You don't necessarily need to be waking up at 4 a.m. But that hustle mentality is super clear in a lot of entrepreneurs. It's not a requirement, though, is it?
Correct.
What are your thoughts on that? Because you built this business on blood, sweat, and tears. So why would you say it's not a requirement when it is something you very much did?
I think it comes down to what problem you're solving and what resources do you have, right? I didn't have many resources, so I had to do that, right? If you have resources, then you don't really have to do that. And I think we were talking about earlier with social media, it's like you can see who has resources and who doesn't have resources. And that's what makes, I think that's what the difference is. So I feel like if you have resources, sleep, it's good, right?
Yeah. And when you say resources, just for the crowd, that means money, right?
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Some businesses are very well funded and they can pay people to market. They can pay people to look after certain components of their business.
Correct.
You didn't have that luxury.
No, exactly. And even right now, we're in the middle of a capital raise, and it's a struggle. And the reason is because Australia isn't known to have dedicated consumer product goods funds like there are in the US. So here, the VCs are focused on tech, which is fine, right? But this is why lots of beverage companies like breweries and like other CPG companies go to crowdfunding. But I'm not taking that route. I want to, again, do something different and try to find, be it angels, like angel investors or VCs that want to take a chance, right? Because we've proven, or I've proven what we've done with no money. Imagine what we can do with money.
This is really funny. Like, and I can relate to this. When I first started the business, I built our website. I'm not a web developer. But I learned the skill on how to build the website. I absolutely got the marketing was important for us. And I'm sure a lot of business owners out there relate to that. But I want to know, how does it differ now for you? Now I appreciate you're only starting the process for capital raising, but what's that going to feel like once you do have money that's not yours that you can now invest and allocate? Will it be a little bit different, or do you feel as if you're going to take that same methodology of we did this without money, we can scale it with a little bit more,
Look, we have a plan, right? And I think with that money, we're going to invest it in growth, right? We're going to double down on what we're doing, but we're going to bring on people that are smarter than me that can help me do that, right? Because in the end, I'd rather have a small piece of a big pie than a big piece of a small pie, right? I think that's a saying, right? And but yeah, I think we're gonna do what works, right? We're gonna learn from others, and we're gonna bring on the right people that are gonna help us get to where we want to be.
And talk to us about the struggle, I guess, per se, with the capital raise. You mentioned, I guess, the lay of the land is the reason why it is the way it is. That's why a lot of the FMCG brands go towards crowdfunding. Talk to us about the process of crowdfunding, capital raising, because a lot of businesses out there would have no idea to what size do you need to be to consider capital raising,
right?
And how do you go through that process?
Well, how do I say this correctly? Not many beverage brands can be, quote, successful without raising capital, right? And no beverage brand that I know of, it could be different, like there probably are, but most recent ones have exited without being profitable, right? Because all that money that's raised is for growth. And in order, you can't have both essentially, right? It's very hard to have profitability and growth, right? You have to focus on the other, I should
Specific
say.
to this industry.
Correct. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But even for tech startups as well.
Yeah.
It's really hard to do. And so, like the process is just, I couldn't do it myself, right? Because this is why most companies have a founder that focuses on building and a founder that focuses on raising capital, right? I'm doing it myself, both, and that's very hard. Context switching all the time. The good thing was that I was able to find a team to help me out with this process. So they have a black book, which is really great, and I also have, through our community, people have reached out saying, "Hey, I want to help you on this journey," which is amazing. I'm very fortunate to have that. So the capital raising team has taken off more of the work on that part, and then I come in to have that conversation so they can meet me and really, because in the end you're betting on the founder, right? More than anything, and the numbers don't lie, right? So either they believe the numbers or they don't, right? And then either they believe in me or they don't.
Yeah. So why is it that most beverage companies don't succeed without capital raising?
It's not cheap. It's not cheap.
What is it specifically?
I mean, you need to be able to, like, for example, we have to order 300,000 cans, right? In one go, for example, right? And that's not cheap. So you need lots of money for that, but also to market it for the people, for shipping, right? It's just not easy. And yeah.
Are these 300 cans already designed cans, or then you have to design on top of them?
Oh, no. Yeah, I mean, you send them the design and they get printed, yeah. That was just an example. Like, we printed 100,000 cans that had a spelling mistake, and that wasn't fun. But, like, no one really saw it, which is fine, but it's since been fixed. Yeah.
If you've got one of those old cans lying around, that's like a relic that you can keep as part of the history.
That's it, yeah, exactly.
I find this really interesting, right? Like, what are the key benefits then you're finding with capital raising? Like, is it an economies of scale thing? Like, how would it improve your beverage business?
Well, yeah, I mean, it would help us invest in a bigger facility to produce more, which in theory should reduce our costs, right, per can. But then also invest in opportunities in different channels that we haven't taken, right? Like, we're mostly a digital product, even though we're a beverage. But we haven't had the opportunity to, let's say, sponsor a soccer team, right? Which would be amazing to do and get involved in sports, sponsor a league or a player or what have you. And that's something that I'm passionate about because, again, you believe believe in sports, right? To get people off the streets and whatnot as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, any injection of money will help us, grow tremendously.
And I like what you said about most beverage companies having two founders, one that focuses on funding or raising capital, and one on the business specifically. You doing both, do you feel like, are you aware of the challenge, and what are your thoughts in terms of how do you ensure that you don't keep your eye off product?
So it's with even in tech businesses, right? Like, they have two founders to do that, but it's also like, there's this saying, you're either in building mode or you're in raising mode, right? Again, to be doing both at the same time, it's hard, especially with one person. But for me, I've always been a product person, right? So it's always, this is the most important thing in the world for me, right? Obviously my family and friends and all that, right? But still, like, if we can't make that, that's the problem, right? And so it's making sure that we have enough funds. We're not burning money, and I'm very cheap. I wear the same thing every day, like, this is who I am. But it's about just making sure that when you need to make that switch, that you have to make sure that this is okay, you know what I mean, before making that switch. And if you have to make, let's say, hey, I can't meet this week because we're having this fire that we have to burn out, then this is important, unfortunately, right? Because we need this in order to get that.
Yeah. And look, I think there's so many juggling things that you need to juggle, particularly as a business owner, that I think you need to be super focused naturally.
For sure.
And so what is the number one factor that you think, or what is one key issue that you think needs to change in today's business world?
and I think we mentioned it earlier, but there's a few things. But I think in my industry, I think here in Australia for us, it's like, how do we get more help, right? How do we get firms that are dedicated to help the future of CPG, so we can become a player, right? And compete with other parts of the world and not have to go external to get funding, right? Because for me, there's only a handful of companies that I know that have raised capital here from VC firms, which is awesome, right? But it's still only a handful, right? Why can't there be more? And how do we help others? Because others are trying to solve a problem too, right? But they just don't have access to capital to basically scale.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned, I guess, the ability of obviously funding allowing you to do that, but us being able to grow, or your business to be able to grow on a global scale, that I think that's probably the key, right? Do you see something like that occurring long term?
Look, never say never, right? For me, obviously, like, I'm American, right? But I'm also Australian.
Yeah.
And for me, we're here, right? I think if we're able to change drinking culture just a slight bit here, then we're doing a good job, right? I think eventually we will go abroad, right? Because it makes sense. But how cool would it be to say, like, hey, you're drinking an Australian brand in, let's say, New York, for example, right? That'd be awesome. And if you're traveling to New York and you see HOPR, I mean, that'd be pretty cool.
That'd be super cool. So from a vision perspective, let's start local. What do you see the business doing in the next 12 to 24 months? 12
to 24. Ooh. I mean, I would hope that we become a household name, within that time frame, but it will take a bit of work. But I think if we just go a little bit further, maybe 3 to 5 years, I think it would be cool to be a household name. And just that people, look, it's going to take time. Like, even Coke and Pepsi didn't, in 5-7 years, didn't have what they have now. But I think to be able to get to that conversation, right? And I think it's happening like a slight bit where people reach out and say, hey, my sister, and this happened, my old boss sent me a message. He's like, funny enough, my sister came over, this is during Easter, and she brought over some hoppers. She's like, yo, you have to try this. And he's like, I've never had that with any other product. And he's like, I thought that was really cool. And I was like, wow, that's awesome. And I get messages from friends that say, they send me a picture. It's like, look what my parents bought. And they don't know that I know you, right? Yeah. And I think if we can get more of that, I mean, we're in a good place. How does, and out of interest, I'm not sure if you're aware of this statistic, but how does Australia compare, I guess, against the world in terms of its adoption of non-alcoholic, beverages? Because I say that because I was talking about this with a friend of mine just earlier. I live in Bondi, and so you go walking in Bondi at 6 a.m. on a Friday, and there are DJs around, like, for run clubs or cafes, parties galore at 6 a.m. You walk around at 10 p.m. and it's like pretty dead quiet. It's like polar opposite to what the rest of the world is doing. And I presume that is heavily based around alcohol consumption or just general going out, which probably speaks to, I guess, people focusing on non-alcoholic alternatives potentially and or not going out. Do you think the adoption of Australian, I guess, culture is more inclined to taking on non-alcoholic alternatives? Not yet. Yeah. And I think, like they said, the Bondi bubble, right? It's I feel like that only happens there and maybe other coastal areas. But if you go into the city, definitely not like that. But I think the U.S. is definitely, from what I see, right, is leading the way. Like the fact that Coachella has its own dedicated non-alc, section, right? And whether or not it's, how do I say this? Like, I don't know if it's real or fake, right? But you see it on social media and everyone's like having a good time with it, right? But like, I haven't seen that here yet, right? And if we want to replicate that, right, I think it needs acceptance at a wider scale, and it starts from the top at these events, right? To be able to say, hey, we need just more than one option, right? More than just one big name option. Should help the other little guys as well, right? But I think we have a ways to go. I love what they do, like the 6 a.m. stuff, which is great. That's on me, but I think look, give it time. It'll happen, and I think we're in the right direction.
Yeah. And this ties in perfectly to what you mentioned with the capital raise looking to sponsor soccer teams. I think the alternative in an environment like that, whether it's entertainment of any sorts, being sports particularly, sports and alcohol seem to go really well together from an entertainment standpoint, despite, athletes not necessarily always encouraging drinking, if that makes sense. I think that would be a fantastic opportunity for you and your business and the sector in general to be able to provide an alternative for sure.
Definitely.
I presume that's your vision.
Yeah, for sure. And to be honest with you, about a month and change ago, I had like this epiphany. And it's because it just hit me that like 75% of our audience is women. And I was like, I feel like it makes sense for us to work with, let's say, women's sports, right? Because if they're more accepted to it, then why not go there, right?
Yeah.
And so it'd be cool to start there, right? And I think it's a great opportunity. Women's sports is growing, for one, and so I would love to be a pioneer, right, as well in that sector. So yeah, I mean, look, we'll see.
Have you looked into any sport specifically, or?
I'd be biased and be like, look, soccer, right?
Yeah.
That's my thing. But no, like, I love all sports, right? And I think if we're able just to help anyone, I mean, we're there.
Have you watched the FIFA documentary on Netflix?
Which one?
This is very random, but it's the whole investigation that the FBI did into FIFA. Anyway, long story short, that's where I learned about the Adidas deal that they did. I don't know if you heard about the Adidas deal.
Doesn't ring a
So
bell.
Adidas signed a long-term deal with the World Cup, which is why they sponsor the World Cup. So,
Okay.
I can see HOPR sponsoring the Women's World Cup for a long time.
Imagine that. That'd be amazing. And that just means we're helping more people.
Yeah.
And that's what we're here for, just to help more people.
From a selfish standpoint, we are business insurance specialists. Out of interest, what are one of the key risks that you face in your business on a day-to-day basis?
Like I would say, how do you manage growth, right? I think that's a big risk, and not running out of money to do so, right?
Yeah.
And that's why that raising capital is so important, right? Just to make sure that you stay afloat, because look, it may look good on the outside, but on the inside, some companies do struggle, right? And that risk is big from a cash flow standpoint.
Because I think a lot of people probably don't understand once you go into the retailers, which I presume is something that you may want to do down the track. Their payment terms are very different, right?
Yeah, look, we're in about 70 stores across the country, right? And so, but they're independent stores, and we've made that choice on purpose. Why? Because we can connect more with them. They know who we are, right? We speak to the owners, the managers, and so they can vouch for you as well, as opposed to getting into the big stores where they take 50% margins, they make you pay for marketing, and it's not always the most friendly environment. But I think times are changing, which is good. But you need, the payment terms, right? Like I think it's like 60 days before you even see a check. And how do you fund that, right?
Yeah, it's crazy. Jose, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show, and thank you for bringing some samples. They're fantastic. I've really enjoyed this one. I think Nikki gives us the tick of approval as well. If people want to find you and connect with you for whatever reason that might be, where can they find you?
So drinkhopper.com.au, that's our website. And then my email is Jose, Josc @drinkhopper.com.au. Feel free to hit me up. I'm one of the few, I don't know how many of you had in your podcast, but I actually love talking to others because when I've reached out to others in the past, when I was starting, I never got the attention. And so I don't want to be that person. And so when people hit me up, I always do my best to answer and just be like, if I can help you, I'll help you out, right?
Yeah.
And I may not be able to, but a new friend is a new friend.
Absolutely. And Jose, you know, it hasn't been long that we've known each other, but the one thing that I've known about you is that you're super authentic. It's been a pleasure to see you develop as a professional, as a business owner, as well as, you know, seeing your business grow. So thank you for, you know, being a good friend, and I look forward to seeing HOPR continue to grow.
Thanks again. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Socius, thank you for joining us today. Please hit the subscribe button if you've enjoyed this episode. And if you'd like to be part of the Socius community, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn to stay in touch. Cheers.